In that role, it is my job to provide independent oversight and ensure the integrity of the ongoing investigation into the ties between Credit Suisse and the Nazis before, during, and after World War II.
We have documents confirming that the Swiss were actively and directly involved in shipping gold for Nazis.
It has become mainstream to judge history using today's standard. But when doing so, it also poses a risk that we neglect the unpretentious elements that led people, companies, and countries to make such radical decisions. It's no secret what took place during Second World War within the Swiss banks. We've all heard about the Nazi gold, the laundering, and the profits generated from that exchange. This video will by no means attempt to deny that any of that ever happened, because it did. Switzerland, albeit neutral, was placed in a very difficult situation, not just because it was surrounded, pressured and loathed by the Nazi regime itself, but because of the hypocritical actions of the Allies, in particular the US, during that time.
Welcome to the Discovery Clock series.
In the 1990s, Switzerland agreed, or rather was pressured by the international community, particularly the US, the UK and the World Jewish Congress, to come forward about their dealings with the Nazi regime during Second World War. In 1995, the World Jewish Congress launched a class action lawsuit against three of the largest Swiss banks of the time, UBS, Credit Suisse, and the Swiss Bank Corporation, to retrieve the deposits by victims of Nazi persecution. The banks agreed to a settlement in 1998. On the 26th of January 1999, the settlement agreement was signed. This entailed that, in exchange for this payment, the plaintiffs and 17 endorsing Jewish organizations agreed to release the defendant banks and virtually all other Swiss business and governmental entities from future Holocaust-related claims. A total of $1.29 billion, or $2.54 billion adjusted to today's inflation rate, was paid out to approximately 458,400 claimants. And despite a reached settlement, the amount distributed was a source of controversy in Switzerland, due to the compensation exceeding the actual value of the assets in the Swiss accounts, amid the threat of US sanctions against Switzerland. This was reported a year later, in 1999, by the Volcker Commission, which estimated that the number was closer to $379 million, or $743.4 million in 2026. The Swiss government did take an unprecedented step to address its broader historical record in an official, formal manner. On the 12th of December of 1996, after a unanimous approval by the two federal parliament chambers and the Federal Council, the Independent Commission of Experts, commonly known as the Bergier Commission, was established, featuring an international panel of Polish, American, Israeli and Swiss historians to investigate Switzerland's conduct during and after Second World War, which included the gold transactions. The commission was chaired by Jean-François Bergier, a Swiss economic historian. The panel had access to unearthed archives from Swiss private companies such as the banks, the insurance companies, and industrial firms. During the investigation, which lasted from 1996 to 2001, the companies were forbidden from destroying any relevant piece of archives from that period. The Bergier Commission concluded that the Swiss authorities and the Swiss National Bank knew as early as 1942 to 1943 that it was purchasing gold stolen by the Nazis from the central banks of occupied countries.
Dans cette stratégie, la commission Bergier et son président ont joué un rôle politique et symbolique essentiel. La Suisse est désormais citée en exemple pour ses efforts de recherche historique.
The only thing that's changed is the report of the Bergier Commission, the initial report that came out as to the admissions about victim gold and about the fact that they had these gold transactions. I think that's very good and fortunate and forthcoming. I hope the Bergier Commission will continue to look into what did happen with truth and with transparency.
This Bergier report is an excellent contribution, perhaps one of the most important that will be made to this whole conference, and the Swiss people should be proud of their capacity to face their past.
Thank you very much.
This transparency forced a national reckoning within Switzerland, something that was never really demanded on American corporations, creating a historical double standard that persists today. Like many European nations in 1938, Switzerland had moved its gold reserve, about 2/3 of it, to the United States and some to the United Kingdom and Canada, fearing a German invasion. After the war began, the German Reichsbanks was depositing the stolen gold into the Swiss banks. For the purposes of this video, stolen gold will refer to monetary gold seized from the central banks of occupied nations, such as Belgium and the Netherlands, and victim gold, which was plundered from the private property and even the physical remains of Holocaust victims. In June 1941, shortly before formally entering the war, the US enacted Executive Order 8389. This law would freeze the assets from neutral countries, such as Switzerland, in a bid to force them to stop trading with the Axis powers, specifically exchanging gold for the Swiss franc. This, however, would have the opposite effect and would place Switzerland in an extremely difficult position. During the war, the Swiss franc had become the unofficial world currency, as it was the only one that was freely exchangeable and convertible worldwide. Nations needed it to buy for essential war materials, such as tungsten from Portugal and chrome from Turkey, which were vital materials for steel production. Moreover, the Swiss franc was one of the few currencies after the First World War to still be pegged to gold. Under the Swiss National Bank law of 1931, the Swiss National Bank was legally required to maintain at least a 40% gold cover to keep the currency stable. However, because the US had frozen 2/3 of Switzerland's gold reserves in New York, the Swiss franc no longer had sufficient gold backing. In an effort to prevent a total currency collapse, the Swiss National Bank had to buy more gold from the Axis powers, approximately 1.2 billion Swiss franc in total, but more so from the Allies, 1.8 billion Swiss franc, especially from the US, who needed to sell their gold in exchange for Swiss franc to finance their own war operations. When the war ended, the tension between the two nations would reach a momentary end with the 1946 Washington Agreement. Switzerland would agree to pay 250 million franc, or $4.4 billion in 2026, toward the reconstruction of Europe. In exchange, the US agreed to unfreeze the Swiss assets and drop Switzerland from the list of blocked entities in 1948. But whilst the US government spent the next decades policing and criticizing the Swiss banking industry, it largely ignored the activities of its own industrial giants. The collaboration between the American corporations and the Nazi regime would eventually resurface in 1974. In February of that year, the US Senate Judiciary Committee's Subcommittee on Antitrust and Monopoly, chaired by Philip Hart, held a series of hearings in the context of the Industrial Reorganization Act, a proposed bill that would have made it illegal for any corporation to simply possess monopoly power in the industrial sector. The hearing was led by a Senate subcommittee attorney, Bradford Snell. He presented a testimony and report titled "The American Ground Transport Against General Motors, Ford and Chrysler," accusing them of monopolizing ground transportation in the United States. It was claimed that General Motors had undertaken a series of measures to slowly dismantle public transportation, such as removing tramways or streetcars and electric rails in a bid to force Americans to buy their cars. It was during this hearing that Snell exposed the dark moral backdrop regarding the conduct of these American corporations during World War II that had maintained functional or profitable ties with the Nazi regime. For instance, General Motors' German subsidiary, Opel, produced the Blitz truck, the Wehrmacht's motorized transport that became a vital pillar of the Nazi war machine, and even developed components for the Luftwaffe fighter jet engines that would later bomb London. Fordwerke, Ford's German division, would continue to operate under the German administration, supplying key military vehicles for the Nazis. ITT was found to have held a 25% stake in Focke-Wulf, the company that manufactured the German fighter planes used to attack Allied bombers. IBM's technology, the Hollerith punch cards machines, was used to organize the census and logistics required for the Holocaust. During the hearings, these corporations often defended their actions by claiming that their German subsidiaries were seized by the Nazi state after the US entered the war in 1941. It is true that under German law, foreign firms were placed under a Reichskommissar or a state administrator, but investigators argued this was often a veneer of state control. In many cases, the American parent companies maintained its communication during that time, and after the war ended, the factories were returned to them, often in better condition than before the war. They even received compensation from the US government for the damages inflicted on their factories by their own Allied troops. Fast forward to today, and despite Switzerland's effort to openly acknowledge and compensate its past historical actions, the US persists in holding Switzerland accountable for something that was already settled in the 1990s. More importantly, it undermines the settlement agreement signed in 1999, in which Jewish organizations agreed to no longer file any future civil claims relating to the Holocaust era against any Swiss bank, company, or authority. The settlement was intended to provide a total release and legal peace regarding these historical grievances. As of the making of this video, UBS has requested from a US federal judge legal clarification and formal protection against a new wave of potential lawsuits seeking to uphold the finality of the 1999 agreement. But as of the 7th of April 2026, the judge in question rejected their request, stating that because there were currently no active lawsuits yet against the bank, the original settlement still holds up and does not require further protection from claims arising from newly discovered Nazi-linked accounts. Ultimately, this struggle highlights a dilemma. Is the law being used as a tool for justice or a weapon of geopolitics? While the US demands that Swiss vaults be revealed in the name of morality, the skeletons in the American corporations' cupboards still remain undisturbed. It suggests that guilt is not always defined by the act itself, but by those who have the power to point the finger at. Hello everyone, thank you for watching the video and for your patience and support. Please consider subscribing and sharing the video, and as always, see you in the next one.